Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we're comparing the Radeon RX 6600 XT and GeForce RTX 3060 head-to-head in 50 games. Now the goal here is to see how these two products stack up using the latest drivers in a wide range of games. But before we get to the results,
today's video sponsor is the MSI Optics MAG281 URF 4K 144Hz gaming monitor. This is a feature-packed display that delivered great 4K gaming performance in our testing with the fast IPS panel, full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 ports, superb 95% DCI-P3 color space, and KVM 2.0 functionality. The MAG281 URF is a product we'd recommend, and it's out now worldwide. Plus, for Australian and New Zealand viewers, score a bonus Steam gift card for a limited time when you purchase selected MSI products using the promotional link below. T's and C's apply.
Okay, so the reason why we're comparing the 6600 XT and RTX 3060 head-to-head in a big benchmark is because they are competing products. The Radeon GPU carries an MSRP of $380 US, while the RTX 3060 is meant to cost $330 US, but in reality, they're both much more than that, about $400 US at the moment at major online retailers such as Newegg. At least they were at the time of making this video. That's quite a drop for the RTX 3060, which was up around $500 US just a few weeks ago, while the 6600 XT was up around $440 US. Meanwhile, supply for the 6600 XT does appear to be drying up, and that's probably due to the imminent release of the 6650 XT, which is expected to arrive next week. Meanwhile, locally here in Australia, the 6600 XT can be had for $550, with the RTX 3060 more like $630. So a clear pricing advantage for the Radeon GPU down under, though again, stock is drying up. Now for testing, I've used our AMD Ryzen 9 5950X test system with 32GB of DDR4 3200 CL14 dual rank dual channel memory. Both GPUs were tested using the default AMD and NVIDIA clock specifications at 1080p and 1440p across 50 games with resize or bar enabled, so that means SAM was enabled for the Radeon GPU. The driver versions used were Radeon Adrenalin 22.4.2 and GeForce Game Ready Driver 512.59, as these were the latest available drivers when I started testing a week ago. Now, we're not going to go over the data for all 50 games individually, as that'd take all day. Instead, we're only going to take a close look at the results for about half a dozen of them, and then we'll take a quick look at how these two GPUs compare head-to-head across all of the games tested in a single graph. Finally, please note all graphs will be made available to Floatplane and Patreon members. Okay, let's get into it. Starting with Dying Light 2, this recently released game uses a proprietary 3D engine developed by Techland known as the Chrome Engine 6, and this is the only game in our entire test suite to use this game engine. It does play well with Radeon GPUs, and here the 6600 XT was 11% faster at 1080p and 8% faster at 1440p. But perhaps more impressive is the fact that both GPUs rendered well over 60 FPS at 1080p using the highest quality settings, with the exception of ray tracing, which isn't enabled by default. Warhammer 3 is another recently released title, and this one uses the Warscape Engine 3, which is used exclusively by the Total War series. Now in this one, the GeForce GPUs do currently enjoy a performance advantage, though it's not a significant one. In this matchup, for example, the RTX 3060 was 9% faster at 1080p and 14% faster at 1440p, which admittedly is becoming quite a significant margin, though the 1% lows are basically identical. Next, we have Call of Duty Warzone, and here the 6600 XT was quite a bit faster than the RTX 3060, delivering 21% more frames at 1080p and 16% more at 1440p. So a strong win here for the Radeon GPU, though keep in mind it was also meant to cost 15% more based on the original MSRP. Now, Forza Horizon 5, this is a well-optimized title that plays well on both AMD and NVIDIA hardware. Having said that, we are using the Extreme preset, so this is as demanding as the game gets. Yet we're still looking at 61 FPS on average for both GPUs at 1440p, so I think that's quite a good result. Moving on, we have God of War, and this is another well-optimized title, and while it does play well on the 6600 XT, it plays much better with the RTX 3060, especially at 1440p. I did double check these results, and it would seem as though the RTX 3060 is 15% faster at 1080p and a whopping 33% faster at 1440p, so a massive win there for NVIDIA. Far Cry 6 uses the Junior 2 engine, and this one runs very well on AMD hardware, largely helped by the fact that AMD did have a hand in sponsoring the game's development. As a result, the 6600 XT enjoys a strong 13% performance advantage at 1080p, and was still able to maintain a double-digit win at 1440p, where it was 10% faster. Now, typically the Radeon GPUs perform really well in the F1 series, but F1 2021 is a bit different, especially when using the higher quality presets, as this enables ray tracing by default, and therefore we do test with it enabled. This hands the RTX 3060 a performance advantage, affording it a 6% win at 1080p and 10% at 1440p. Now, disabling ray tracing does favour the 6600 XT, but I felt that we should test with it enabled, given that that is the default configuration, and that is how we normally test. And we're still looking at around 60 FPS at 1440p. Next up, we have Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, and this version of the game does require ray-traced accelerated hardware, so ray tracing effects are enabled by default, and for testing these mid-range GPUs, I've gone with the normal setting. Now, although the 6600 XT was able to deliver highly playable performance at 1080p, the RTX 3060 was 29% faster, and that meant we're seeing similar frame rates at 1440p from the GeForce GPU compared to what we saw with the 6600 XT at 1080p. The Rainbow Six extraction performance was comparable, with both GPUs delivering over 130 FPS at 1080p. Still, the RTX 3060 did edge slightly ahead by 7% margin at 1440p, but overall, the performance was very similar. Frame rates were also very similar when testing with Apex Legends. In short, the 6600 XT was slightly faster at 1080p, and then slightly slower at 1440p. Both GPUs, though, did prove to be plenty powerful enough for this title, delivering over 100 FPS at 1440p using the highest in-game quality settings. Another competitive title that delivered competitive results is Fortnite. Now, although most Fortnite gamers won't run the Epic preset, we're interested in testing GPU performance here and not CPU performance, which is where things quickly head with the competitive type settings. So, assuming that you don't run into CPU-bound conditions, Radeon and GeForce GPUs do scale very similarly with the quality presets. So, using competitive settings with both the 6600 XT and RTX 3060 will deliver a similar level of performance. Now, the last results that we're going to look at come from Cyberpunk 2077, and here the 6600 XT was 9% faster using the higher quality settings at 1080p. And both GPUs really are best suited to 1080p gaming in this title, as the slightly dialed down quality settings saw just 44 FPS rendered on average at 1440p. So, based on the dozen or so games that we just looked at, the RTX 3060 and 6600 XT appear to be extremely close in terms of performance. There were a few titles here and there that favoured one over the other, but for the most part, performance did appear very similar. Of course, I did spend a bit over a week testing through 50 games, so I suppose we should check out all of that data. Starting with the 1080p data, we see that the 6600 XT was just 3% faster on average, and this means overall they're basically identical across a wide range of games, as we deem anything within a 5% margin to be a draw. And that means for 20 of the 50 games tested, performance was near enough to identical, with margins 4% or less. There were just a handful of outliers where the margins extended to 10% or more in either direction. The big losses for AMD were seen in Resident Evil Village and Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, unsurprisingly 2 of the games that use ray tracing, and then we see that Vermintide 2, God of War and PUBG were also bad titles for AMD. Now, games where the 6600 XT performed exceptionally well included Assassin's Creed Valhalla, World War Z, Borderlands 3, Warzone, Call of Duty Vanguard, and Death Stranding. Now, increasing the resolution to 1440p flipped the results more in Nvidia's favour, as now the 6600 XT was 2% slower overall, but again, we deemed that margin insignificant. This time there were 23 games where the margin was 5% or less, with just 3 extreme examples in either direction exceeding 20%. So, depending on the resolution, one may be faster than the other, we're only talking about a difference of 2 to 3% here, meaning performance overall is really going to be about the same. Of course, there were instances where the margins did grow to around 30%, which is obviously very significant, so you will want to pay attention to how the Radeon and GeForce GPUs stack up in the games that you care about. Still, 50 games is a substantial number of games to test, so it is fair to say that for the most part, there will be less than a 10% difference between these two GPUs. And that means purely from a performance standpoint, they can command a similar asking price. Having said that, once you take the full picture into account, it is difficult to argue that the GeForce RTX 3060 isn't the better buy, and in fact is even worth a premium. This is because when you start to look at what each product offers beyond rasterization performance, there's really not much to talk about when it comes to the 6600 XT. Firstly, the RTX 3060 packs a 50% larger frame buffer with 12GB opposed to 8, so it should handle future HD texture packs a lot better, meaning future AAA titles could potentially look better without hurting frame rate performance. And in my opinion, this is a really nice feature that shouldn't be overlooked. The RTX 3060 also packs a full x16 PCIe 4.0 connection, whereas the 6600 XT is cut down to just 8 lanes, and this can cause serious performance-related issues when exceeding the memory buffer. So that's just another reason why the memory subsystem of the RTX 3060 is vastly superior. On top of that, you get DLSS, which is widely supported by many new AAA titles, and it also works really well at 1440p and beyond. So resolutions where the RTX 3060 could really do with a performance boost. Now, AMD does offer some upscaling techniques for 6600 XT owners, and more plans are in the works to head off the DLSS threat, but for now at least, DLSS is the best option. Then there's ray tracing, which I know some of you couldn't care less about, while others swear by it. Regardless of where you stand on ray tracing, the fact remains that it's yet another strength of the RTX 3060, and as we saw in the titles that used this rendering technique, the GeForce GPU had a clear performance advantage thanks to the more mature implementation. So in a nutshell, similar rasterization performance, superior ray tracing, DLSS support, a bigger VRAM buffer, and the full PCIe 4.0x16 connection all make the RTX 3060 a better product, and if available at the same price, it's the obvious option. Recently, the 6600 XT has been a good bit cheaper, making it a viable option, but at least at the time of making this video, it's no longer the case, at least over in the US. As I mentioned earlier, here in Australia, the 6600 XT is 13% cheaper, and I think at that point it does start to become a bit of a toss-up as to which way you should go. Saving $80 on the 6600 XT, it's not huge, it's not a huge saving, but if you don't care about ray tracing and you don't think DLSS will be a huge benefit, then it is probably worth the saving here locally. Whether or not AMD can tempt us with the Radeon 6650 XT, well, that's yet to be seen, but we are keen to look at that next week because as things stand right now, we feel that the GeForce RTX 3060 will be the preferred option for most of you. And with that, I'm going to wrap this one up and get back to more testing because, as I said, more videos, well, more GPUs to test to create more videos next week. So yeah, if you enjoyed this one, give it a like, subscribe, and if you'd like to become more involved with the Hardware Unboxed channel, we have Floatplane and Patreon. Links for those are in the video description. You'll get access to our exclusive Discord server, monthly live streams to myself, Q&As, and behind-the-scenes content. So if you're interested, check that out. If not, perfectly fine. And I would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve, and I'll see you again next time.